and thank you for joining us with Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga, and each week we invite you to send in your questions and we'll explore the fascinating stories of the city of Mississauga together. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all the heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. This week's episode of Ask a Historian focuses on an emergency that took place several years ago now, and we recently received an inquiry from a student who was looking to learn more. Had heard about this moment in time and was interested in finding out more. And so I thought this would make an interesting chapter for Ask a Historian, and for anyone listening who has memories of that moment, pictures, stories that they'd like to share, please contact us and share those stories with us. So our first story this week revolves around the Texaco Refinery Fire of Port Credit in 1978. At 1:30 a.m. on October 2nd of 1978, a fire erupted at the Texaco Refinery storage facility north of Lakeshore Road. This is just to the west of Mississauga Road. A 2 million gallon storage tank of furnace oil had ignited into a blazing inferno. It could be heard and the heat felt in a wide area bordering the tank storage facility. Police immediately evacuated 1,000 residents from a 1-mile area around the fire. Flames threatened other storage tanks that housed gasoline and aviation fuels, and it took over 100 firefighters to over 10 hours to extinguish the blaze. An investigation determined that the fire had been deliberately set. It was arson. Texaco employee Thomas Albert Coxhead, who was 24 years old at the time and from Lorne Park, was charged with arson. Coxhead was employed as a quality control technician at the refinery. Coxhead had opened valves that ignited flowing oil with a flare. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Firefighters from Texaco, Mississauga, and Toronto Airport were able to extinguish the fire, but damage was estimated at over $2.7 million. After the fire, refining operations ceased and never resumed on the site. A fire like this threatened the lives and livelihoods of not only employees, but of residents in Port Credit and the immediate surrounding area. So again, that's in brief, very brief, a story of the Texaco Refinery Fire in Port Credit in 1978. And like I said, we're not dealing with ancient history here. There's probably a lot of memories and a lot of stories and maybe some pictures kicking around. We'd love to hear more about this moment in time. And keeping on the theme of fires, our second story this week, and the last one in this week's episode, is on the Malton Gas Explosion of 1969. And again, talk about things that might have memories. We'd love to hear from you and love to see pictures. On October 25th of 1969, a natural gas pipeline under the intersection of Airport Road and Derry Road exploded, destroying many buildings. Malton resident Jean Perigo was killed in the massive explosion. Some businesses were able to recover, but many buildings were lost, and the intersection was eventually realigned, forever changing that kind of set the four corners of Malton. There was a faulty gas line beneath the junction of Airport and Derry Roads, and it caused a huge fire when it erupted. Again, one resident, Jean Perigo, was killed, and 21 others are listed as injured. The fire was so hot that firefighters were unable to get near to the fire. They actually focused on keeping the fire from spreading as they waited for the gas company to be able to shut the line off. 9 stores, several houses, and around 40 cars were all destroyed in the fire. And we have a list of some of the stores that were lost. The Avronian Restaurant, Langford's Variety, Malton Hardware, Baker's Lumber Outlet. They're all blown apart by the explosion. Again, over 40 cars, many of them just family vehicles in their driveways, etc., were lost in the fire. When the gas pipeline was examined after the fire, it was determined that a wrong valve had been shut off, putting too much pressure on what was a dead end line of a pipe, and the pressure accumulated in that pipe until the valve ruptured. And again, the pictures tell kind of the stories of the ferocity of it, and there's quite a bit written on the Malton Gas Explosion. It kind of was the major emergency faced by Mississauga. Of course, then leading up to the story we just covered in the 1978 Port Credit refinery fire, and then both of those overshadowed, obviously, by the 1979 train derailment. But back to the 1969 Malton gas explosion, Malton gas fire. There, police, firefighters were involved. Toronto police come assist for traffic, directing traffic in the area. And it just the newspapers the day recorded the day that Malton blew up. It was the story of the time, and quite a when you see the pictures again, it really tells you kind of how ferocious that fire was, and just how hot it must have been blowing, and people describing the gas in the fire sounding like a scream, an unending scream. Firefighters had to stuff cotton in their ears to keep their eardrums intact. It was so loud, and so this is something that again really affected not only the residents of Mississauga, but had a widening effect on the kind of the idea of emergency preparedness and emergency response in the city of Mississauga. The gas line had erupted at 2:55 in the afternoon, and was finally brought under control just after 7 o'clock in the evening. Again, October 25th of 1969, the day that Malton blew up. And with that, we thank you for spending time with us again here on Ask a Historian. Please keep those questions coming in, and we'll explore different stories of the city of Mississauga each and every week here on Ask a Historian. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all the heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. And we'll see you next week with another episode of Ask a Historian.